This is a Renew original recording.
Hello and welcome to the Believe in People podcast. My name is Matthew Butler and I am your host, or as I like to say, your facilitator. Today we are here in London where I'm interviewing Millie Gooch, who is the founder of the Sober Girl Society, a published author and social media influencer who is on a quest and a mission to help young girls live a sober and healthier lifestyle.
So firstly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Millie. I'm the founder of Sober Girl Society and the author of the Sober Girl Society handbook.
Thank you very much for coming onto the podcast today, Millie. I want to talk a little bit about your journey so far. And the reason why is my producers have done a lot of research, and basically I've kind of come in here blind because I'm aware there will be people that don't necessarily know your story. So I've kind of want to come in from that direction and try and know as little about you as possible before I come here. So tell me a little bit about your journey and your story so far.
Yeah, so I started drinking really, if we go way back when I went to uni. That was like my first kind of big experience of like nightlife, drinking culture. And I went to uni during the time when it was like Geordie Shore was at like its peak. So it was like actively encouraged to go out, get so drunk and make a fool of yourself, and there wouldn't really be many consequences. And that's kind of when I started, and before that I hadn't really been a big drinker. So I went to uni, started drinking very, very heavily, and I think first of all when I started drinking it was something that I just did because everyone else was, and it was like really ingrained in uni culture. It was like freshers pub crawls and all that. And then towards my kind of like third year, I noticed that actually it was something that I was doing more because I wanted to. And my relationship with alcohol at that point, I think then looked slightly different to my friends. They were all like knuckling down with their third year dissertations. And I was like, just want to go out and get pissed. And that's all I really cared about. And then when I left uni, I went to work in PR and I went to work in journalism, and they were both booze heavy industries. Although everyone I speak to is like, my industry is really booze heavy. And I think they all are. So kind of went into that, and my drinking just got steadily worse and worse. So I was, weeknights I was going out with everyone, going to the pub, waking up in the middle of nowhere, train stops miles away from my house, getting, £100 Ubers home. And I was blacking out. I'm quite small. I was drinking a lot, so I would not remember large portions of my night, sometimes the entire night, regularly not how I got home. And I would wake up the next morning in like an existential crisis. So I would get that beer fear, hangover anxiety, and I just kept doing it on like a cycle. So I would have like 4 days of feeling absolutely horrendous, like I'm never drinking again, and then it would get to Friday and I'd be like, I know what makes me happy is going out and drinking. And I think I really started to notice the effect it was having on my mental health. That was the biggest thing. My anxiety was through the roof. I was always depressed, and drinking was like, for me, I've got a really busy, overactive brain. I think a lot. I get quite insecure about things. And for me, it was just this like blanket of confidence that when I would drink, I would feel invincible. So I kind of realised then, so I was like early 20s, that my relationship was getting a bit out of control with alcohol. My friends and family were quite worried, my mum especially, because I would come home in all sorts of states and, wake up the next morning and she'd be like, do you even remember what you did last night? I'd be like, no. So I got to 26, I went on a night out. I do not remember a single thing from the night out. I just woke up the next day and just said, I just can't do this anymore. Like, I'm so depressed all the time. I'm so anxious. I'm using this for confidence when I'm feeling insecure. Like, if my mental health is bad, this is the thing that I'm turning to, and I think it is going to end up quite dangerous. So I always say it was kind of like fate. A few weeks before I made the decision to stop drinking, I was on the tube and I read a copy of Stylist magazine, which had an interview with Catherine Gray, who wrote The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober. And I was like, wow, her story kind of seems really similar to mine, but actually maybe she's a few years down the line. And it was kind of this like, I always say it's like the ghost of Christmas future, that she kind of presented me with it and was like, if you keep drinking, this is what your life is going to look like. So I made the decision that I was going to stop drinking, and all my friends thought it was hilarious because I'd said I'm never drinking again about 400 times at this point. And then I just somehow stuck to it. I just kept going with it and kept going. And then I got about 7 months sober, and I realised that I needed kind of support. And although my friends at that point had become quite supportive, although initially ambivalent, I realised that they didn't actually understand what I was going through. So I couldn't speak to them about, like, I was single at the time, so it was, when do I tell someone that I don't drink? Or should I go on a date with someone if they're drinking? Like, what if they get horrendously drunk? Will it make me want to drink? And I didn't know who to talk to about these things. But at this point, AA didn't feel like the right fit for me. And I know so many people that have gone through the program and swear by the program, but I think at the time I just had these preconceptions of what AA was, which was that I'd go in, there'd be 60-year-old men there, and I'd say, oh, actually, it's not the first thing I think about when I wake up, but every weekend I'm going out and getting absolutely horrendously pissed and basically fucking up my life. And I thought they'd be like, oh, come back when you've lost your job or you've crashed a car. So now I know that is an incorrect perception. I know so many people that swear by it, but at the time that's just what I believed. So I was like, I'm going to actually look out there, see if there's maybe other young women that aren't drinking. And at 26, I think I just felt quite isolated, couldn't find anything. I turned to Instagram, as all millennials do, and there was nothing out there. And no one was even really talking about it. So I thought, okay, maybe I could start, a little community. There might be like 10, 15 of us. We go for mocktails and we chat about all things alcohol-free. So I just started Sober Girl Society, and then 4.5 years later, it is like my full-time job, run events and meetups up across the UK, do like virtual calls, write a book, and it's now become like a whole thing. So that's the story in the briefest way, not even that brief that I think I can.
It's a great story. So how old was you when you started university then?
So I was 18, so I'm actually an August baby. So I literally turned 18 and then 3 weeks later went to university. Yeah. So I hadn't even really legally drunk and gone to many bars and clubs, and I looked really young at the time, so I didn't really get into many places. So it was like I was this child who then was shipped off to university and was like, here you go, you can drink as much as you want. I was like, brilliant. Yeah.
So, did you not really drink as a teenager? Because I think, thinking about my own experiences, my first introduction to alcohol was sitting on a park with my mates. I don't know if that's like a northern thing to be doing, but up where I'm from, that's what we used to do Friday, Saturday, Sunday, be sitting, a bottle of vodka, a bottle of Frosty Jacks on the park. And that was when I think I first encountered, some of the feelings that you're describing, then, that you experienced a little bit later. Did you have a relationship with alcohol in your teenage years at all? Or?
No, I didn't, which a lot of people find strange, but I also think maybe contributed to why
that's what I was just thinking, yeah.
So I used to do dancing, competitive dancing. So every weekend I was just always dancing or at competitions. And I think as well what I realised is, looking back now, is that was my thing to help with anxiety and relief of stress, and being with friends. It was really sociable, and that was my thing that I would turn to if I was kind of anxious. And then when I went to university, that was kind of taken away from me, and so I didn't have that thing to fall back on. I didn't have a routine, I didn't have structure. All I had instead was this magical new elixir that gave me this confidence. And I think because I'd never had those experiences either when I was younger, I think all of a sudden it was just like, oh, I can do this. And so, I don't really know whether not having a relationship with alcohol before uni contributed to me just going, oh, all of a sudden I can just drink as much as I like.
No, I think it's interesting to say that, because I remember 10, 18 myself, and it's like, I can legally drink. And then there was this other part, I'm like, oh, you've been doing it for a few years anyway. So then, other than actually being able to purchase alcohol legally, there wasn't that buzz there. But it's like cannabis now. I had a history of cannabis when I was a little bit younger, but the novelty wore off pretty quickly. But my friends have just kind of got into that now in the 30s and are almost obsessive with it. But because I experienced that young, the novelty wore off pretty quickly. And I'm kind of glad that it did. Do you know what I mean? At an early point in my life, because then obviously been able to get things back on track a little bit later. But I want to go into what you're saying. I want to know, basically, you've talked about feelings of anxiety and what was coming with it, but what was your rock bottom moment? What was the moment where Millie said, right, I can't do this anymore? Was there something specific where you just thought, this is it?
Do you know what I always say? I think I had loads of rock middle moments. Okay. There just wasn't one thing, but there were so many things that I ignored. I always think one of the worst things was I was on a night out with my friends, don't remember anything, and I got home, and I live in Kent, so I'd got from London to Kent and do not remember a single part of the journey. And when I woke up, I had these weird flashbacks of me crying on a corner of an NCP car park. And this is literally all I remember. And I looked at my Uber, and it had said that my journey had been terminated. So I'd been kicked out on the corner of a road from Covent Garden, where I was, to King's Cross. And I looked at the postcode, and this is me the next day shaking with fear, Googled it, And it was a corner of an NCP car park, and all I remember is crying, and that's it. And then I have no recollection of how I got home. There was no transactions like on my card. I didn't have any cash on me. So whether I just got in a random person's car and got them to drive me to King's Cross, and I just remember the next day feeling so vulnerable and so scared of what could have happened. I think that was always one of my mum's biggest fears as well, was like, someone's going to kidnap you, you're going to fall on the train tracks and die. Like, anything could happen to you because you are just not aware of what you're doing when you're drinking. So that for me, I think, was a bit of a wake-up call. But then I still carried on drinking for like another 2 years after. But there were like so many moments like that of things I'd done. And like, I remember one time, like, my friend threw me this really like amazing birthday night out because they wanted to leave at 2 and I wanted to carry the party on. I told them they were all see you next Tuesdays, and I hated them. And then the next day I woke up and I was like, I'm an awful human. And the things I used to do when I was drinking just did not fit with who I was as a person when I was sober. I used to be like, I don't know who this demon is that comes out when I drink. And then the next day I would get this like real moral conflict of like, oh, maybe I'm secretly a bad person. And that actually just comes out when I drink. But there was so many, like, just, I've got like hundreds of stories like that, but there was never that one point. And I think in a way that kind of not having that one rock bottom moment meant that I just kept carrying on drinking, because people will be like, you're not that bad, you know, you're still functioning at work and you're still maintaining some relationships. So it was almost like, unless I'd hit rock bottom, people didn't think that it was a good enough reason to stop drinking.
So you said obviously you didn't really see yourself fitting into AA, and you know, people with are there because of alcohol dependency. You spoke a lot about binge drinking. Did you ever experience alcohol dependency in the sense of you wake up and and I know you said you wasn't necessarily thinking about it, but did you need to have a drink to get going, or was it just like an evening binge drinking thing?
It was mainly an evening binge drinking thing, but a lot of the times if I was drinking on a weekend, if I was hungover on a Friday, the old hair of the dog would come in. So if I was going to like a Saturday brunch, I would be like, oh, I can start drinking at 11 now, but it was always at those like socially acceptable times, rather than waking up and on a Monday morning being like, the first thing I want to do is drink. And I think because I used to get so hungover and so anxious, I actually wouldn't want to drink for a bit, because I would be so put off by what I'd done and my behaviour and how I'd acted. And then it would just get to Friday and I'd be like, oh, it's fine, I feel better now, I can go out and drink again.
So what I'm liking about this is the first time I've probably spoke to someone with that's looked at their alcoholism in the past as you know, as a binge drinking problem. Normally it is alcohol dependency, and I suppose one of the things I've encountered before is someone who didn't think there was alcohol dependent because they was drinking that much at night that they could go to work and then at about 5-6 o'clock on the night they'd be like, oh, I'm feeling a bit, I'll have a drink, but didn't necessarily relate it to alcohol dependency.
Yeah.
But they was drinking that much in succession on the night that their body was actually dependent, but the withdrawal just wasn't setting in again until like 6-7 o'clock on the night, which I thought was incredible, because that's the definition of a functioning, you know, alcoholic, I suppose. Would you ever label yourself as an alcoholic, in, you know, even now or previously?
I don't choose to use a label. There's a few reasons. Just one, it felt initially like it didn't fit me when I was 26-year-old and a binge drinker. Secondly, I think there is a lot of stigma attached to it that I didn't necessarily want. And I think at this point now I wouldn't, because it does feel like something that I've overcome, and I'm not sure it's a label that I particularly would want to keep forever. So personally, I don't use the label, but I always think in terms of labels, people have to use what they want. For some people, the word alcoholic is really empowering and they own it and it's great. And for some people, it can be like quite a cross to bear that they then have to kind of live with for a long time and possibly don't want to.
I've been to a few sort of conventions and things like that in the past, and one of the things that, and again, like I've been working in this field for around 7 years now, so my understanding of it has changed. But I remember in the early days, they did this thing and they asked people like, you know, who here is over 20 years, you know, alcohol free, and you know, people are standing up and getting rounds of applause. And I think one of the things that, just going back to what you were saying about that label, was when does recovery become recovered for some people? And I suppose the reality of it is that it never does. And I think that's, you know, the relationship people have with alcohol. I mean, I suppose big question out there now. Do you feel if you were to have a drink that you would go off in terms of a binge drinking moment, or do you feel like you're mental health and your understanding is in a much better place, that you wouldn't go that far, hypothetically?
Yeah, no, I've thought about it, and I think it would start, I'd have one or two, and I'd be like, cool, I've cracked this. And then the next time I'd be like, oh, go on, I can have 3 or 4. And then the next time I would just end up binge drinking. I never really saw the point of 1 or 2 drinks. I never drank just because I really liked the taste. I just drank because I wanted to get absolutely shit-faced and not have to think about anything. I liked that feeling of like absolute oblivion, blackout until the next day. But at the time, it was like, okay, great, everything I think and all my worries and all my fears and all my insecurities absolutely dissipate. So that for me is the attraction of drinking. So I don't even think I would want to have 1 or 2. So I think even if I could start that way, for me it's kind of pointless, because I didn't drink because I just wanted a couple. I drank because I wanted to get absolutely out of it. Yeah. So I think it would probably start steady if I went back, but I think it would be so easy to slip back into drinking.
So I'm a volunteer coordinator at my work, so I work with a lot of people, who've been in addiction, now in recovery, supporting, giving back to the community. And it's something that I've had a conversation with quite a few people. Because, to be honest, I think sometimes you go, you shouldn't ask these questions. Like, yeah, but I want to know. I know it might seem a bit intrusive and odd and hypothetical, but I like to kind of see where people are at. And it's funny the amount of people that say the same thing. It's like, it was the reasons for the drinking. Do you know? So even though they're in a healthier place now, it's that risk of, I don't know what would happen if I had the one. Too much of a risk. In terms of you getting sobriety, did you get help from alcohol treatment services, or was this just like, right, I'm going to raw dog this and do it myself sort of thing?
Yeah, I did raw dog it. I say that I didn't get help from alcohol treatment services, but I did have a lot of therapy, which I think really helped me target the reasons why I was drinking. So I did like a lot of CBT, I did talk therapy, I kind of went through all of that, because as well, when I stopped drinking, it was like the first time that I actually had to deal with my emotions as a human being, and that for me was overwhelming. As someone who has a lot of emotions, is highly sensitive, to then all of a sudden be like, I've got nothing to take the edge off. And I would get like, when I stopped drinking, in fact, for a little bit, my mental health kind of got a bit worse, because I was getting panic attacks, because I would be in like clubs and I would feel like really claustrophobic and wouldn't be able to drink. So I was like, this is not good at all. So I think for the first time in my life, I was actually learning how to healthily deal with emotions. So therapy for me was so helpful. So I always say I kind of raw dogged it, but I definitely didn't.
Have you experienced any sort of alcohol treatment services since becoming like an alcohol ambassador? Have you worked with any particular services?
I've been down to a couple of rehabs actually. I went to Delamere, which when they first opened, which was like an incredible place, and I hear first-hand stories from a lot of people that have been. I think we tend to be a bit of a secondary resource in terms of a lot of people come to us then after they've been to rehab and they want to find a community and they want to find friends. So we're always very clear, we are not a recovery program. We do not operate as a recovery program. We are a community of women who don't drink, are trying to cut down on drinking, or people that just want to do fun stuff without alcohol. So you'll find a lot of people perhaps come out of rehab and then don't necessarily want to associate with the friend group who are still going out and doing drinking drugs every weekend. They want to find new friends who want to go for coffee or brunch, or actually do want to go to a club but don't want to drink, and then they know by going with that person that they're not going to be tempted or pressured into it in any way. So for us, it's kind of like a community that people can reach after they've gone through those services.
How do you think we could probably make, I think more, so some of the research that we're actually seeing more younger women coming into services now for alcohol treatment, which is absolutely great. How do you think we could make, I suppose, alcohol treatment more accessible for younger women?
It's really hard, because I think for someone like me, being back then who didn't go through it, like a lot for me was that it felt quite scary, and I felt like it was for people who were perhaps worse than me. There was this idea that my drinking wasn't good enough to be considered bad.
It's like the AA thing that you're saying, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that for me is like, I'd be wasting precious resources, and I think maybe just making that message clearer that it's kind of for anyone at any point in their journey, because really prevention is key. So if you can get someone at my stage who then doesn't go to the next stage, because I think the next stage for me would have been full-blown alcohol dependency and waking up, because if I'd have just continued on that trajectory, which luckily I hopped off early, but I think there's so many people that will wait until they get to that rock bottom and don't consider changing their drinking beforehand, largely because of a lot of ideas that we have in society that, people who don't drink are boring, or you're not that bad. And which I always think is funny because we don't think about it like any other drug, even like smoking. You're like, oh, we don't wait until your lung collapses until you consider giving up. You give up because you know it's bad for you. So I think just maybe making it clearer that it's actually for people at any point in their drinking. Actually, if you're just a bit worried that you're drinking too much on the weekends, it doesn't have to be that you have a full-blown alcohol dependency before you can seek help for it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I do think obviously we do see people come through our doors to often at the point of dependency, but as a service, I often say, we're not here to tell people to stop drinking. We're not here to tell people to stop using drugs. It's a harm reduction service at the end of the day. So especially with alcohol, we're not there to tell people to stop drinking. If that's what they want to achieve, or we understand they're dependent, then the advice changes naturally. But it's mainly to encourage people to get their drinking into government guidelines, to get a better understanding of what binge drinking is. And I think whilst that message is out there, it could be pushed a lot more. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I do think more people come in at that stage where they are dependent.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard to get across the idea of harm reduction because we have this weird thing with alcohol. Like if I went online and started talking about, oh, I run and it's really great for my mental health, no one would say, oh, I was really preachy. But the amount of comments I get when I start talking about people even just reducing their alcohol intake is like, oh, you're preachy, you're boring. For some reason, we just have this stigma around alcohol and trying to give advice around it. So it is, I think, one of the hardest subjects to kind of encourage people to look at their behaviour around it, because you're told it's preachy or you're trying to take away people's
You sound like the fun police, don't you? This is the one thing that I always worry about when we went to a Pride Festival earlier this year and was there to give advice and stuff, and I thought, God, we just look like the fun police, don't we? We're not there to tell people to stop drinking. We have all different resources, but we've got bottle toppers to stop people from having the drink spiked and things like that. But that's the reality of it. We're there to say, have fun. Yeah. But do it safely. But even just the word safely, it's like when you start a new job and you've got your health and safety, and it's like, oh God, you're on health and safety, oh God, Anytime you just hear that word, it just sounds awful. Going back, you talked a little bit about being in nightclubs and that feeling of claustrophobia. Do you avoid those places now? Are you happy to be in there? Or?
I am happy to be in there, but I'm very picky about what I do and the people I go with, and I don't stay definitely as long as I used to. I think when I was drinking, you could have put me anywhere. You could have put me in, warehouse project until 8 a.m. and I would have been perfectly fine. And then when I stopped drinking, I was like, I actually don't even think I like house music. I have to be somewhere where, they've got a good selection of alcohol-free drinks. I feel quite safe and it's quite easy to get home for me. And I like the music and I like the vibe. It's not too busy. I think I'm just a lot more selective with what I do. I think that has naturally come as I've got older as well, but I think when I first stopped drinking, I was very careful about the things that I wanted to do. I quite liked things like festivals because I could go and take myself off for a bit if I wanted to and go and sit at a burger van and get a Diet Coke and just chill out while all my friends stayed in the tent, and it was quite spacious, and if I felt a bit stressed or claustrophobic while I was watching a band, I could just go and there'd be another place that I could chill out at. And a lot of festivals now I've got yoga tents or wellness talks, so things like that I really enjoyed at the beginning, that had different elements as well that felt like they were engaging my brain, because I think that's one thing that I noticed is I was getting quite bored on nights out, whereas before I could have just stayed there for 10 hours just dancing in one spot.
It's like a vortex on a night out, especially when you're drinking. It's like you look at the time, why the hell's the last 5 hours gone? Because obviously it's in terms of the way the brain works and your memory and stuff. But what's it like meeting people and in terms of dating? Because naturally I think when you're on nights out you meet people and it's a good time and place to get numbers and meet again. What's dating like for you now, living sober?
I think when I first stopped drinking, it was terrifying. It was one of the hardest things, especially I think perceptions have even changed over the last 5 years. So when I first used to tell people I wasn't drinking, they were a bit funny about it. Whereas I think now they're like, oh, my cousin doesn't drink, or I know somebody who does. Yeah. I think it does seem more widely accepted, but I think the main thing that I've learned from things like dating is that I used to rely on alcohol for my confidence so much. So I would go out, I would drink, I would be confident. But the next day that confidence doesn't stay with you because you've essentially just got it from a bottle. It's like liquid courage, that's what they call it. Yeah. But by dating sober, I really started to just build confidence innately, and that confidence kind of stays with you. You do your first sober date and you're like, I didn't die, this is great, like it's fine. And then you kind of work up the courage, you do the next one, and then by the time I did like my 10th sober day, I was like, I'm a seasoned pro at this now. Like you really start building that confidence within yourself. I always feel like over time, and it was never this at the beginning, but not drinking has made me more confident, which is weird because I just didn't think it would. I thought I'd become really like a shy, retiring wallflower, but it forces you out of your comfort zone, I think, and it is scary, and it always will be scary. So people ask me for tips, and I'm like, I can give you like some tips, you know, like if you're going on a date, put on a good playlist, like wear something you're comfortable in, because if you feel uncomfortable, you're going to be stressed and you're going to want to drink. Like there's so many kind of mini tips, but I just think the biggest one is you have to just keep persevering with it, and then just over time that confidence will grow when you realise actually you can get through these things, and you can get through them without a drink, and people aren't going to think that you're boring on a date, and you're interesting, and all these things.
And imagine if someone was put off by the fact you didn't drink, that would be, as the kids say, a red flag.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I'm hearing quite a lot recently, red flags. But yeah, I think it'd be quite interesting. What would... Have you experienced that, I suppose? Has someone been like instantly, put off by you not drinking? Have you ever felt being on a date and someone's sort of like, oh, go on, you can just have that? Have you experienced, them sort of situations?
I've had it like through the apps where people will be like, oh, like, and sometimes they're quite nice about it, but they're like, oh, like, it's not really one for me, but cheers kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that didn't really happen. Like, so I was dating a few years ago and the perceptions were so much better, but it's never happened to me on a date, because I always say, tell people beforehand, like, you don't want to get on that date and then say, oh, by the way, I don't drink, because if they're awkward about it, you're going to feel
Didn't take a night out, he planned, could have been around dinner.
Just put it out there early, just like when they say, because usually the chat happens, oh, do you want to go for a drink? And I just normally say something like, yeah, it's cool, just so you know, I don't actually drink alcohol, but I'm happy to come for like a lemonade or whatever it is that you want to do. And then when you get on the date, you just don't have to worry about that conversation, because they know. So I definitely did have people who were kind of like, it's not for me. But then, we were never going to be compatible if that is the case. So it's actually just a great elimination process, because you get rid of a load of people early who you just wouldn't vibe with.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to... Would you like one?
I'd love a Schlur.
Let's do a Schlur.
Never
What
too
flavour
early
would you
for a
like?
Schlur.
What have we got?
Oh, yeah,
We've got sparkling zero fruit, white grape and red grape, white grape and red grape.
Go on, I'll have a red grape.
Red grape. I haven't had a Schlur in years.
No, I haven't. But I think that we should actually be very thankful for Schlur, because I feel like with all these new drinks, they were an OG.
Do you know what I've heard? Because I didn't realise it was an alternative to alcohol. To be honest, what do you think to non-alcoholic beers in terms of non-alcoholic drinks that taste like alcohol? Because I know you're not. You said you're not part of experience dependency, alcoholic. But I've had this conversation with some of our service users before, and they said it'd just be a trigger for them to have the real thing. Yeah. What's your opinion on that?
I think for some people it can be. So I always, if I'm ever talking about non-alcoholic drinks, I always make a disclaimer, if you think it could be triggering for you, then avoid it. But for some people, I think they can be really helpful, especially people who are looking to kind of harm reduce rather than give up altogether. Because for so many people, drinking is like a habit. So... And it's a social thing, and if people can feel like on a night out they could, have a Budweiser Zero or something like that, they can kind of still feel part of it rather than having, like a pint of Diet Coke. So for me, I've read a lot of stats around them. I know there was a big report about how actually no and low drinks are really helping with harm reduction. So I do think on the whole they are a good thing, but I understand why for some people they might be triggering. I think my relationship with them has kind of changed. I think when I first stopped drinking, I was really looking for things that were emulating alcohol, so your non-alcoholic gins, your non-alcoholic beers, and those I don't tend to drink as much anymore. I will drink a non-alcoholic beer if I'm on a night out or something like that, but I've kind of now started looking into sodas and kombuchas and those fun kind of wellness drinks and different seltzers and things like that, whereas before I was really kind of trying to look for an alternative.
My producer Robbie said you was doing something with non-alcoholic drinks. Actually, are you starting your own line or something? What's I can't remember the complete details, but what's that about? What's happening with it?
Yeah, so I'm starting a non-alcoholic e-commerce website called Sippers. So at the moment, non-alcoholic drinks are not hugely widely available. So some supermarkets have better selection than others, but there's still so many incredible ones out there that aren't listed in supermarkets. They find it hard to get listings. So it's going to be basically an ASOS, but for non-alcoholic drinks. So we're going to have everything on there from, spirit alternatives to beer alternatives, wine alternatives, but also the fun kind of like craft sodas and wellness drinks and all those things that are coming out. So if you want non-alcoholic drinks, there's going to be a platform where you can just come and it'll be easy to use that. If you're looking for a whiskey, this is what you want. If you want Aperol Spritz alternative, this is where you come. So yeah, it's going to be called Sippers, and it's a labour of love, but it's getting there.
Good. No, it's nice to hear, actually, too. I think it's a great idea, because it's one of the things sometimes you think all ideas have been done. There is nothing new that we could possibly do as a human. And the next thing, people come with ideas and you think, why didn't I think of that? I hate it when something like that comes on, because sometimes it can be the most basic things. But and to be fair, that's kind of thrown me off a little bit. We was talking about relationships and things of that nature before then. Let's talk sober sex.
Yeah.
What's the biggest difference from going, I suppose having sex under the influence and drinking to what's it like now for you?
I think remembering it is probably the key thing. I think there were so many kind of times when, especially as a woman, the lines of consent were very blurry, and I think that's a big thing that I hear from a lot of women. So I think that was one major thing for me, that I would wake up and be like, I don't remember that. I don't remember what happened. And the tricky thing is that, I could have fully agreed to it, and also I could have maybe not agreed to it. And being so drunk and so blackout and not remembering, I think, was terrifying for me the next day. So remembering it is a good one. Being an active, willing participant, I think. And then I think the other thing is just like, again, this kind of like learning to be confident without it. Like, first time I had sex sober, I think I was terrified, and was like, especially with like a new person that I was dating, so I was like, this is so unnatural and weird. And then I think after a while, I was just like, learn to actually be confident with myself, my body, because I was like, well, I can't rely on alcohol, so I'm going to just have to go into this. And I think that is one thing that you just learn to be a bit more comfortable with yourself. So that growing confidence thing, I think, weaves through a lot of things, and I think sober sex is one of them.
Oh, brilliant. No, thank you. No, it's I imagine going from like the sort of the madness to it would have been much different. And I suppose one of the things that I think I actually watched something that was similar to this topic, but talking about them feelings of connection, I suppose, and being able to appreciate that connection a little bit more.
Yeah.
So. Are you dating anybody now?
I am.
Oh,
yes.
okay. How's that going?
I'm a nice boyfriend. Yeah, no, it's going really well actually. How long have we been together now? Since December.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, like 8 months. So, and he actually, so it's quite funny. When we first met, I told him I didn't drink, and he was like, "Oh, cool, I won't drink on our date." So he didn't drink, and then he's just not had a drink since.
Oh, really?
Which I always think is so interesting, because it's happened to a lot of people in my life that I think we have this like idea of, oh, they're drinking, so I've got a drink. And actually people are quite relieved. Like, my friends love hanging out with me, because they're like, oh, we haven't got a drink. Like, they haven't got me hungover tomorrow. They know they're going to be home. Like, if we go out for dinner, they know it's not going to end in a 3-day bender. They know that they're going to be home in bed by 10 o'clock. So actually there's this like relief. And I found it when I was dating as well, that people were like, oh, that's cool. Like, I can kind of take a night off, because I don't think people wanted to go out on a day, get really wrecked, and then go to work the next day. So there's almost like this relief, and it's like you've given someone a permission slip that actually they don't have to get pissed. So yeah, it seems to happen a lot with people in my life, that it's not I force anyone to not drink, but just because I'm not drinking, they're like, oh, well, I'm not going to drink then.
Well, do you know what, it's funny you should say that, because I think when I think about a lot of times when I do drink, it's often I haven't drank to get drunk for a very, very long time now. Do you know, I'm talking years. I'm the type of person, I might have a beer with a meal at the pub, and that's probably like as far as I'll go. The interesting thing for me is when you talk about situations, like if I don't have any social gatherings or parties, I've got a 9-month-old daughter now, so the thought of drinking, I can't parent with a hangover, it'd be an absolute nightmare. So the idea of sort of drinking now is I'm probably even further away from it than I used to be.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is so for something like Stoptober or Dry January, by making a conscious effort to not have a drink, I will want to drink. That's the weird thing. Like, right now, I've probably gone a good few months without a drink and not even contemplated it. But if I was to tell myself, right, you're doing Stoptober, you're doing Dry January, I'd be like, now I want to. What's your opinion on campaigns like Stoptober and Dry January? Do you think they're beneficial?
Yeah, I think again, it's a bit like the non-alcoholic drinks. I think for some people they're beneficial. I think for others they're not. I think it's a lot of it depends on kind of what type of personality you are and your relationship with alcohol. So for some people, it can be the first time in a long time that they have not drunk, especially at like a weekend. Or so for some people, it can give them a real tester of like, oh, this is what a hangover-free weekend would be like, and then, oh, actually, maybe I could do this a bit more often. And it can give a bit of like a mindful space to people to think about their relationship with alcohol and, understand. I think the thing with them is if you do them, you have to kind of do the work as well, which is like, oh, actually, I feel really stressed and that's what's making me want to drink. It's kind of like linking the points and understanding at what points you're wanting to turn to alcohol. I think that's one of the things that people miss with Dry January. It's not just like, it's an opportunity to learn, which I think, it sounds a bit wishy-washy, but is understanding actually when are the times that I want to drink and how can I use this going forward to kind of change my relationship with alcohol. I think some people come out of them and will carry on. I think some people, will go straight back in and possibly binge drink because their tolerance is slightly lower. It's very dangerous for them. But I think the months are great. However, I think if you're going to really change your relationship with alcohol, I always suggest 3 months. I think is like, it gives you a real understanding of things.
That's a good idea though. Actually, on this topic, I've asked a few people this question. What is your definition of binge drinking?
Oh, I don't know.
Because it changes. Yeah. I think everyone has a different opinion about it. I think the one thing that I found interesting is the amount of people that binge drink but don't realise they're binge drinking, because they was like, I didn't realise that was binge drinking. So yeah, I'll just throw that question out and see what. I
think drinking where you get to a point that you are not in control of your actions and that you would possibly, but then it's hard as well because some people consider it like 3 or 4 drinks, but for me it's that like drinking to get drunk and like losing all points of like actually being social. I think if you're having like 1 or 2 drinks and your aim is, I just want to be a bit chatty with friends. For me, if I was going 5 or 6 drinks, I was like, slurring my words and all those things that I think people drink for the benefits of, I was going past that point. So yeah, I mean, it's a very wishy-washy definition.
No. I don't think, to be fair, I'm sure there is a proper definition out there as to what binge drinking is, but the thing is with drinking anyway, it's a cultural thing, isn't it? And I think that's why we're all going to find different definitions of it. Talked a little bit about campaigns then, Stoptober, Dry January. We've got for the first time in my lifetime, I think ever, we've got a World Cup coming up in December. Yeah. Talking about culture, I think especially as a country, we've sort of really, our drinking culture is really ingrained in football. What is your message to people coming up to, I suppose, this time of year?
I think this is a hard one because I think there are slight kind of gender differences with our relationship with alcohol. There's a lot of ideas around the fact that women are perhaps more emotional drinkers and men are perhaps more social drinkers as a very broad, idea. So it is really hard when approaching that topic as a woman because I don't go to football and I don't understand those things. So, but I think things like alternatives are really good. Like you said, the Budweiser Zero, there are so many good non-alcoholic beers now, like just unreal craft beers. So many good ones. So I would say like really investigate those are kind of like the first thing to do. But I think it is hard. Someone, instead of actually giving the advice, I'll recommend someone who I think is fantastic, who is Fraser Frank. So he's an ex-footballer. Okay. And his relationship with alcohol is kind of very similar to how mine was. So when I was dancing as being younger, he was a footballer. So he really did not drink for a while when he was in his teens. And then as he got older, and stopped playing football, he then started turning kind of to alcohol. So he has some great advice on his platform for men. So I would.
Is there? I've actually got as a little note, Sober Boys Society. Wow. Is there an alternative? Is there something in the works that could possibly
help? Watch this space.
Oh, okay, nice. I think it's one of them things where it'd be daft not to, I suppose, capitalise on it to some extent, because I think, like you're saying, there's a lot of men going through similar issues as yourself, and I think one of the things that we was talking about earlier is getting to it before it's too late. Trying to nip it in the bud, the dependency. A lot of our, I think in terms of our service, it is male dominated. Yeah. Both the alcohol service and the drug treatment service is male dominated. So I think as well the options for men aren't great. Some people don't like that ethos of NA and AA and that I am powerless over my addiction. I have to hand myself over to a higher power. And there are alternatives like smart meetings and stuff like that. But again, it's that structured sitting around, and it goes back to labelling. That's the one thing I found interesting. Do you know, the term alcoholic and addict, for I suppose for a culture of people who often hate being labelled, they're happy to have that label. So I think that there is the benefit of an alternative to what you're doing as well, which is just promoting healthy messages. So I know you can't say. It looks like you can't say much more. So I'm not gonna push you on that one.
I've been asked about it a lot over the years, and I've always said no. I'm targeting women, but it is really creeping up. So I might have something in the works.
Good, that's good to hear. I've got here. What level of pressure do you feel leading a movement like this? So you're a published author. You're forever in the media spotlight. What is it like being Millie?
Oh, good question. No, do you know what? I love it. Like, it feels so rewarding. It is the best job that I think I could possibly do. And like, when people come to my meet, after every meetup I cry. I'm an emotional person, and I just watch people like come into the room, and I get messages beforehand like, oh, I'm really scared to come on my own. And first of all, I'm like, look, everyone's coming on their own, so you're absolutely in the same boat. And then they come to the events, they're really timid, they don't want to speak to people. By the end, we're like kicking them out the door because they don't stop chatting. We're like, oh, we're closing now. Like, and you just watch people like bloom and meet other people who are like them. For some people, it's the first time that they've been in a room with other people who also don't drink and don't think they're weird and don't think they're boring. You just see them light up, and I absolutely love it. Like, I think the one time I felt pressure, so I got given an award from the Research Society on Alcoholism, and they flew me to Florida, and I was going to be in this room accepting my award with all these scientists and doctors, and I thought they're going to think I'm so stupid, like this girl just like with her sparkly pink page on Instagram talking about sobriety. And I was just so overwhelmed with how nice everyone is. So many people came over and was like, I think what you're doing is amazing. And like, I thought I was going to get there and just feel so silly, and people were going to be like, get her off the stage. But it was so nice. Like that was the one time I think I felt pressure, because I was like, well, this is actually quite serious, because it was in an environment that like I'm totally not used to. Awesome. But I just love it. It is so like rewarding just to see people, and like I'll get messages from people that'll be like, oh, hi, I've just read the book, I'm a week sober, and then 6 months later they message me again and be like, oh, it's my 6 months anniversary, and it's just like the loveliest thing to be able to like play a small part in people like finding themselves and living like a happier, healthier life.
Is there an element of pressure, like people expect you to know everything, that you've got all the answers? Is that something that you experience?
Yeah, I think so. And I do get a lot of messages that are like one-to-one messages, like, please, can you help me? And so I have to direct them to all the resources I know, like you guys, so many other amazing charities and people that are doing work in this space, because I'm like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, like I can't give you one-to-one advice. I don't know your background, I don't know why you're drinking. Like that's the main thing I think I feel pressure because, and I always reply to my messages and I always provide the resources I can, but it's hard because I think people want to speak to you directly, and I know that it is not good to do that.
Yeah, because like you've said, in terms of alcoholism, there is this level of, there is dependency, and I think the level of misunderstanding of dependency, and to take it back to years ago, we did an outreach, and this woman's daughter was screaming at us because we was telling her, okay, you've got to keep drinking, but you need to drink less, because her body was, physically dependent on the alcohol, and her daughter did not understand.
Yeah.
And I think so many people don't understand that alcohol is a depressant drug, and how that affects, and it is a medical issue, isn't it? So what's it like? I suppose you can have people coming at you in all different levels, aren't you? You said yourself you was a binge drinker, so for people experiencing binge drinking, you're going to be the perfect person to talk to.
So if I get questions that are like, oh, how do you go on a date sober, or I'm going to Bottomless Brunch with my friends at the weekend, like, is there anywhere you'd recommend that's got good alcohol-free options, anything like that, I'm your person, like, I can respond. If people are like, I physically can't stop drinking, then I'm like, you need to go to a medical professional, because if you stop drinking all of a sudden, your body could go into shock and you could die. I'm very clear about that there are questions that I am happy to answer and questions that are outside of my remit. So I think it's just kind of making that clear. But yeah, I think the pressure is when you get messages like the second ones from people, and you just want to make sure that they get to somewhere as safely as possible. But I've done brief intervention on referral training, like all of those things, just to make sure that I'm in a position. And I think this is, so many people say, oh, can you run an event here? And oh, can I run an event for you here? But I'm so cautious that actually vulnerable people are going to come to these events, and if people that are running them don't have the training of someone maybe comes, they're really drunk, like, and they don't know where to signpost them or where to refer them to or who to call, that for me is quite a big issue. So in terms of like safeguarding and things like that, I always want to make sure that I'm at the events, just because I know where to signpost these people to or what to do if that happens. So yeah, I think some of the pressure has been like understanding that I'm not a professional, but also giving myself as many resources as possible so that I can make sure that people are signposted to the correct place.
How much training have you had to do then since, achieving sobriety, to have an understanding of all these different areas of substance misuse and alcoholism then?
Yeah, I think quite a bit. So I've done like a lot of formal training, but I also just I've read so much, especially when I was writing the book. I didn't realise it would be writing like a dissertation, and I come from a journalist background as well, so I should have known better. But when I started it, like I was just reading all these like really heavy research books and looking at all these studies and like speaking to all these charities and all these like amazing scientists and psychologists and things like that. So I feel like I learnt so much when I was writing the book. But I always like if I see like free trainings or free workshops, I'm always like that looks really cool. I'm gonna like go into that and just make sure that I'm kind of giving myself as much knowledge as possible, but I don't have all the answers.
Because it is a minefield to people that don't know. And do you know what I mean? That woman's daughter. I was in that exact same position before I started working in this field. I used to think, well, if you don't want to use drugs anymore, stop using drugs.
Yeah.
If you don't want to drink
simple.
anymore, stop drinking. Like it was that easy. And I think that's kind of was obviously the big thing for me, was to go into and do all this research, but to do it on your level as well. Like I said, this expectancy of knowing all the answers. I can't imagine it being too easy for you.
I'd like reading, so it's fine.
So have you found a difference in, I suppose, geographical locations in terms of that north and south divide? Like talking earlier, we talked about our teenage years and the culture of what it was like for us. I mean, I don't know what it's like down south, but have you found there's a difference in sort of drinking habits and behaviours and the way people approach alcohol, the way people approach sobriety?
Yeah, it differs, but it's also quite similar. So our biggest kind of reach is the bigger cities, so like London, Manchester. So across the cities it seems to be quite similar. It's almost like the bigger the drinking culture is, the more people are interested in sober girl society. It's not like, oh, that's such a big drinking culture so we don't have any like members up there. We have loads because the drinking culture is so massive. So that's been interesting. I think it is becoming more similar across the board. I think like maybe 5 years ago, I think there was more of a north-south divide, but I don't know, personally for me and what I see, it seems to be like the interest is definitely ramping up north for sobriety content.
We have a thing in Hull called the Low Ale Trail, and it's basically like a set amount of pubs that offer non-alcoholic beverages, and we promote it quite regularly as a healthy alternative. Have you ever been to Hull before?
No.
Would you like to come to Hull and do the Low Ale Trail?
Absolutely, get me to Hull.
Yes, we're going to do it then. That's brilliant. I've got here that you've actually been doing some new projects. So you've been reviewing restaurants as a non-drinker.
Yes.
And as an infant. What's that like?
Yeah, fun actually. So I started doing like just a few chain restaurants, because I think that so many restaurants could step up their game. Like as a non-drinker, I just think at this point in time, I just think restaurants have no excuse to not offer a few good options. And so I kind of wanted, and people always say to me, what's a really good restaurant to go to that's got good alcohol-free options? So I thought, okay, let's review them, go and do some. So you go to some and they'll have like one beer and you're like, cool, but I don't really fancy
Beck's Blue,
that.
and it's like, no, not Beck's Blue.
Not Beck's Blue.
Yeah, any but
Actually,
Beck's Blue.
Complete tangent, but about a few years ago I got asked to do a programme on Channel 4 where we did a non-alcoholic bar crawl, and so there was 4 of us and each had to choose a different thing. And so Scott, who we were with, had to ask for a beer in every place, and so this was like 3 years ago, and he was like, oh, it'll be fine as long as they don't give me Beck's Blue. Every single one they went into, he was like, have you got a non-alcoholic beer? He was like, oh yeah, we've got Beck's Blue. And he was like, no Beck's Blue.
Yeah. Everything can just taste like it. You can physically taste the glass bottle on a Beck's Blue. It is absolutely awful.
Yeah.
And like I said, this way, I don't know why I was so big on the Budweiser one. Maybe it's because of like a tin, I don't know. But what other projects have you got going at the moment, if any?
Oh, I mean, I'm always doing something or other. The big thing that we're trying to do really is expand the events. So we've got some really exciting events for particularly January. Like we've got some cool ones coming up for the end of the year, but in January we've really started like collaborating with other kind of like communities and people in the kind of sphere, which is really great. So We're going to have, a massive event in Jan, which will be really cool. So the events are taking up a lot of time. And then obviously Sippers is quite an undertaking in itself.
Yeah,
but
I can imagine that. Yeah, of course,
yeah, just trying to get as many people together. We've sort of recently launched our virtual calls that take place every Saturday. So they're just like a really informal space. You can either come in and chat, or you can just log on and listen, turn your camera off if you want to. And again, it's just about meeting other women. So people will come on and go, my friend was a bit of a dick about me not drinking this way. What conversation should I have with her? And someone will pipe up and say, I had the same with my friend. This is what I said, and now we're really good. So, they're not recovery meetings. They're just kind of an opportunity for people to meet other like-minded women and chat about all things alcohol-free. So, there's always stuff going on, and I do want to write a book too, but just haven't got around to it yet.
Okay, yeah. Well, I suppose as an influencer, what are the most effective ways you found to communicate with a younger audience?
I think making it accessible, and I think a lot of people go, it's meant to be about sobriety and it's all like pink and sparkly, but for me that was one of the things that put me off kind of like AA and all this. They felt really scary and really overwhelming and really life-changing, and you couldn't just like maybe dip your toe in, like, you're sworn in and then maybe you're made to do the 12 steps. Like, I just want something that maybe people could dip in and out of for a while before committing to it. And I always try and make it really clear that actually you don't even need to be sober to come to our events. You've just got to be sober at the event. So trying to encourage people to actually just do stuff without drinking. And one of the events that we do is a dance class, because it sounds like such a silly thing, but so many people say to me, I could stop drinking, but I could never get on a dance floor sober. So that would hold me off from stopping altogether. So we were like, right, let's rectify it. Let's run some dance classes. Show people actually, you can get on a dance floor sober. So we started kind of like running those events. So I think just making it kind of not scary, making it really accessible, trying to make it look a bit cool, I think it is always good. And showcasing all the other women that we have in our community, like inspirational people who are also young, who are leading these amazing, fun, fulfilled lives because they stopped drinking. So I think that was one of the biggest things, and really promoting that message of it's not about rock bottom, it's about, becoming more mindful with your relationship. I think the word sober curious has become quite good for us, because I think it really allows people to come to it with curiosity and not have to feel like, they're going to be indoctrinated into this cult of sobriety. So I think just making it look as accessible and less scary as possible.
I like the sort of dipping your toe aspect in of it as well, because I think AA, NA, them environments, it's a lifetime commitment, and it's all the work that you've got to put in, taking an inventory of self at the end of every day, and over-analysing every sort of action. There's a guy that I work with, and he can sometimes come to me like, Matt, I need to make amends for yesterday. I was like, I don't why you,
it's fine.
I was like, don't worry, it's fine. He said, and it could be like the most trivial thing. I was like, but it's something that plays in his mind, and it's a completely different world, I suppose, to what it is that you're doing. Would you like another drink?
Oh, why not? I'll have a top up.
Yeah. Good time to have a little top up.
This is great.
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
Millie, we've got your book here with us. Tell me a little bit about the Sober Girl Society handbook.
So I wrote the Sober Girl Society handbook during lockdown, which was interesting in itself. But there are so many amazing books out there for sobriety, quitting drinking, etc. I just felt there was one thing missing from the space, and I thought that was something for younger women. I think everything I read when I first stopped drinking was aimed at people slightly older. And then again, something that promotes this message of it doesn't have to be rock bottom. So it's very rooted in kind of sober curiosity and meeting people where they are, and a lot about mindful drinking and harm reduction, and that was really key for me. And the third thing I think was missing was a focus on mental health. I don't think a lot of the sobriety books focused on mental health. So there's a huge amount. It's like a real handbook. It's a really practical resource, so it includes everything I know about not drinking, and it's less about getting sober and how to deal with kind of all the things doing sober. So sober weddings, sober bottomless brunches, sober dating. There's a whole chapter on dating and sex in there that you can read that my dad has still not read. So, and everything in there. So it kind of is a bit of my story, but it's also just a really practical handbook. And then at the end as well, there's kind of a bit on the alcohol industry, because I like to throw that controversy in at the end. So it's kind of quite a breadth of things really, but it's really good for anyone who just wants to mindfully drink, stop drinking, cut it out for a bit. It's not like a really hardcore, we're going to convert you to sobriety instantly book.
Yeah. You spoke a little bit about your mum earlier, and I think we spoke a little bit about your mum before we went on camera as well. What was your relationship with your dad for all this? Because I think as a
I mean, as a dad, all you want to do is, I mean, again, my daughter's only 9 months, but I think just the thought of her starting school and everything, I just want to do a wrap up. What was that like for your dad? You going through all this stuff?
Oh, I think my dad has always been like a very strong and silent type. Like, would pass the messages on through my mum. I would wake up in the morning, be really hungover when I was living with my parents, and my dad would just kind of like shake his head and not want to like talk about it really. And then I would get an earful from my mum that I kind of knew had the messages from my dad. I think he was really worried. I just don't think he knew how to approach me about it. So it always kind of went through her. But I mean, I've got a great relationship with my dad. We're very close. And actually, so my dad, about 2.5 years ago now, had a stroke, and since then he has hugely reduced his alcohol intake, and he was quite a big drinker before, and one of the reasons I think he had the stroke. So we're now quite bonded over non-alcoholic beers, which is great. And like, if we go to the pub, my mum will have a wine, and the two of us will sit there with our little non-alcoholic beers, and like I bring new ones home for him, and I'm like, Dad, have you seen this one? So yeah, that's been. Oh, it's not good that he had a stroke, but it's
sometimes it takes something. You know, we talk about rock bottom moments and things like that, and you know, health scares and things can be. There was something on the telly the other day. It was on about the links of alcohol to cancer, and I can't remember the woman's name, not a celebrity, but in remission from breast cancer, and she said it completely altered her view on drinking because of the links too. I think it's interesting when I deliver alcohol awareness training, and I talk about the amount of illnesses that alcohol is related to, and I do think like how is it legal? Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes, and we one of the things that I put out there is like drug related deaths, alcohol related deaths, and the difference is like hundreds of thousands. And you can argue obviously more people drink than they do heroin by all means, but it's still just bizarre what it's linked to. And there's no sort of cap on it. There's nothing physically stopping us from binge drinking. No. It's just when you really think about it, it's pretty mental, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think it was Professor David Nutt that came out and said alcohol is the most harmful drug in the world, because when they scored it on this like scale, it wasn't just because the harm to the user, it was also the harm to society. So through like crime, you know, all those things, domestic violence, everything like that, the harm that it was causing is so much greater than someone doing ecstasy, because they're not necessarily going to go out and then commit all these things. And I always remember that really stuck with me, because I thought it was so interesting, just the amount of things that it permeates. I remember reading, and one of the stats in the book is like alcohol, like drinking. The spend for the NHS is £3.5 billion, and like especially now we're all rallying around and we're like, you know, fund our NHS, and we all donated to Captain Tom when he was like doing his walks. And then you look and you're like, this is costing us so much money, but the amount it makes in taxes is far more.
That's it. It's the amount of people like going to A&E with head injuries and broken bones, all from being under the influence of alcohol. Is your waiting time in a A&E is probably partly due to the amount of people that could be in there with alcohol-related injuries, especially if you're in there on a Friday. I mean, I won't even go on a Friday. I've had to go before on a Friday night. I thought, I'll wait until Saturday morning or something. I thought, I'm not even going now. It'd just be an hour.
I wrote in the book, I think it's 3 out of 4 on a weekend. That's with alcohol. And there was quite a funny one that I read for the book research. It was a woman who was clapping for the NHS in her garden during lockdown, and fell over and hurt herself
under the influence
because she was pissed, and then had to go to A&E. So like,
well, good job she clapped for a minute at first.
As long as she clapped,
that's the main thing. Christ, that's mental, isn't it? Is there anything else that you'd like to promote before I ask you a set of my 10 random questions?
I mean, not really, just like the events, anything that we're kind of doing. Like, would love to encourage more people to come and how can
people? I suppose how can more girls, women get involved into the Sober Girl Society then?
Yeah, so if you visit the Instagram page or the website, they're the 2 biggest places. So we have like an amazing blog that is written by people in our community. So if you've got experience and you've stopped drinking, or you've got a story to tell, we're always looking for blog submissions. That would be amazing. And then people can come to our events, which is really great. They can come onto our virtual calls, especially if they've got like long-term sobriety as well, because we get a lot of newbies come onto the virtual calls. So it'd be amazing for them to hear about people who have got kind of like long-term sobriety. or if you're new, come to one of the virtual calls or the events. There's like so many ways that people can come and get involved. Even if they just want to share their story on the page, that would be amazing. We're always looking for content of amazing women who have kind of changed their relationship with alcohol or stopped drinking entirely, just to inspire maybe other young women who come to the platform. That's the first thing they see is, oh, she looks cool, she's living her life, and that's amazing.
Right, I have 10 questions. I ask these to all our guests. They are the most random 10 questions. It's a thing that our producer introduced, and it does make for some interesting conversation. So completely unrelated to everything that we spoke about so far. My first question is, what is your favourite word?
Oh, God, I never thought. Magical.
Magical.
Yeah, that could be my favourite word. Well, I've never really thought about it, so that is now my
favourite word. What's your least favourite word?
Oh, moist. I feel like that's probably a common one, isn't it?
Do you know what? It's interesting. A lot of people that hate moist. It was on a radio advert recently, and they're saying moist. Like it when you're talking about a cake.
Yeah.
It's
moist.
actually quite a nice word for a cake. Is a moist
squelch. Something that's like a sound.
I get that one. Tell me something that excites you.
Oh, what excites me? Just everything. I'm very easily excitable. I think that's the problem. Like, I see a really cool sunset and I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Like, I'm very excitable. So I think a lot of things.
Okay, so what doesn't excite you then?
Oh, maths and finances. I've been putting off my tax return for months now. Oh, God, anything numbers related just doesn't excite me whatsoever.
What sound or noise do you love?
Oh, the sound of the sea, waves crashing. I'm such a water baby. I love being anywhere near water. And I love surfing.
Very calming, isn't it?
Yeah, so calming.
Not so much. I don't know if surfing's calming, but water.
I find it calming. Like I realise it's stressful and quite demanding. But when I'm out in the sea, and I'm just like,
how long have you been surfing?
Well, I'm not a professional.
Okay.
I just do it when I can. Yeah. So like I first learned in like Cornwall a few years ago, and then I did it in Bali, and I did it in Canada, and went back to Cornwall this year actually.
It's one of them things, surfing, when you watch it, it looks really easy, and
it is so
when I just now as an adult, when I was a kid and you'd see surfing on like cartoons, like, oh, that looks easy, and now as an adult I'm like, I just don't get it. I don't get how it physically works.
Yeah, it's tiring as well.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Oh, like I've got a real thing about wood. So I've got like a phobia of wooden lolly sticks. I like or like wooden chip forks. Don't know what it is. The sound of when they're breaking. It's just the worst.
We've actually gifted you a big tub of wooden lolly sticks.
When I was little, my brother used to put them in my coat pocket. It was a practical joke. So I put my hands in my pockets and we lifted with lolly sticks.
What's your favourite curse word?
I say a lot, actually, I think. Yeah, I'm like...
First wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Oh, I mean, I'd love to be a singer, but I can't sing a single note. I'm so tone deaf. I was born to sing.
I actually said if I had 3 wishes, I reckon one of them would be to be a singer. Because I would love. I don't think people who do sing realise how lucky they are.
No, I think that all
even
the
just
time.
No, it don't have to be a great singer, but just to be able to sing and not be tone deaf.
Yeah.
You know, where people look at you like, stop.
I'd love to just like whip it out at karaoke. I'd love that.
Like Susan Boyle at the Britain's Got Talent. So everyone's just like, wow.
Either that or an astronaut. I think I'd like to be an astronaut.
That's nice. What profession would you not like to do? What's the worst thing? It doesn't necessarily have to be a slight on people that do it, just something that wouldn't be for you.
Oh, definitely some kind of accountancy or finance job. Not dig on them. It would bore me to tears.
And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
It's a free buffet. That's what I'd like. Just go in, there's just chicken nuggets and sausage rolls galore.
Nice.
That'd be my dream.
That'd be a dream. Yeah, I'd be happy with it. Thank you very much for coming on, Millie.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Would you like to open our bottle of bubbly?
Oh God, now we're going.
I was going to do it, but I felt like it was too much pressure, so I thought I'd hand that to...
I used to be really good at this because I worked in a bar, and then I did an internship one year, and there was another intern, and she'd obviously never done it and felt the pressure, and someone said, oh, can you just pop that Prosecco? And she did it, and she popped it in her eye, and she had to go to hospital, and after that I just became like...
Alcohol-related incidents were not under the influence.
Exactly,
More trips to
so many.
What's it like working in a bar then? Did you have problems with alcohol back then? Or?
That was at uni. I worked in loads of bars. Again, that's why I think I was drinking so much, because all the booze was free.
Yeah.
And like even on my nights off, I used to go into the bar because I worked there. I knew everyone behind the bar. So they all used to give me free drinks.
Oh, there you go. That wasn't as bad as I thought.
There
it
we
was gonna
go,
be.
seamless.
And if you enjoyed this episode of the Believe in People podcast, don't forget to check out our other episodes and hit that subscribe button.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Our name is CGL Hull. That's CGLHULL. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, and Google Music. So please like and subscribe to receive regular updates. You can also search for Believe in People podcast on your favourite listening device, and if you could leave us a review, that will really help us with getting our message out there and rising up the daily podcast charts.